Joining us now is former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and Council on Foreign Relations President Richard Haass. Welcome both. So let's talk about President Zelensky's speech to the United Nations today, Richard. It was extraordinary. We expected him to scold the world leaders, but he really challenged the whole world order, the post-World War II world order, as it is being played out now in Ukraine, as it's been played out before, with Russia as a permanent member of the Security Council. Did he not?
He did, and it's totally understandable why he did. The world order is not an order, and it is failing him. The United Nations as an institution is failing him and is failing us all. The problem is the United Nations was created as a venue where the great powers of the day could come together. It was not meant to be used by one great power against another. It has no real capacity other than what the great powers agree to do. So again, the speech was understandable, but I'll be brutally honest with you, Andrea. It's not going to make a difference in terms of the UN. It's not going to basically help get what the president obviously wants, was an end to this war, and obviously no Russian military escalation. It simply won't affect the basic dynamics.
And Richard and Ambassador McFaul, I want to share with you that I'm told that Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley just told the House Armed Services Committee that when they're talking about a protracted war, it was suggested by Jake Sullivan yesterday at the White House briefing that we're talking about months. Mark Milley said measured in years. He said if not decades, I believe, but he doesn't know about decades, is what he said, actually. We're talking now about years. And I don't know, Mike McFaul, how it would be possible for Ukraine to hold up under the kind of brutal aggression that Russia has displayed for years.
Is that Secretary Blinken coming by, past you there, Andrea, or is that just fire engines?
He has not arrived yet. No, that's just for the other motorcades. There are a lot of people arriving here for these meetings tomorrow. Sorry.
Well,
but Mike McFaul, I mean, how can this go on for years?
Well, I'll trust General Milley's assessment. He's a military expert more than I am. I do talk to Ukrainian officials and American officials, pretty senior folks, and I think that is a common assessment. I think we, as outsiders, were watching these heroic events, truly heroic events around Kiev, and then witnessing truly horrific killings around Kiev. By the way, I think that's on purpose. I think Putin wants us to know what a killer he is as a method of deterrence. But I think we also need to be aware that the Russians still have a lot of capacity to fight. Even if they've lost the numbers that the Ukrainians claim, that means they still have 80% of their forces available. They're redeploying to Donbass. That's obvious that that's going to be the next front of this war. And that could be a protracted war for months, if not years. Exactly. There you go. There you see the map. Putin wants to connect Crimea to Donbass. That's very clear. Capturing Mariupol and then connecting, and then maybe beginning to negotiate, but maybe starting to move against, in particular, Kharkiv. And I think it's just way too early for us to assume that we're in the end game of this horrible, protracted war.
No, I take your assessment that we should not be misguided or fooled by the Ukrainian success in holding Kyiv and in the appalling Russian ground war, because they have so much power from the air and from long-range artillery. Richard Haass, so what more can Blinken do here in Brussels with the Europeans if they're not going to do oil and gas sanctions? They did coal today, which is not the main act for Russia in terms of exports. What can sanctions do to slow Putin down, inflict more pain?
Well, the one sanction, Andrew, that would obviously make an enormous difference is the one that's not in play, which is to significantly accelerate the Europeans stopping their imports of, in particular, gas. You continue to strengthen the NATO, but there's nothing at the moment we can do other than, and here I'd go back to what you were just talking about with Mike and what General Milley was talking about, talk to people about being prepared for a war that's measured in months or years. And I think it's highly likely for Vladimir Putin it's less risky for him to sustain a war than it is to accept a peace that might be seen as making him look weak or making him look like he failed. And he doesn't think the sanctions are coming off regardless. Everyone's talking about him being a war criminal. So his incentives to have a peace, to stop this, it's not as though he or his country are going to break out of pariah status. So I think the most likely scenario is something that grinds on. It becomes an open-ended war of attrition, another frozen conflict in the center of Europe. And increasingly, we need to gear our strategy about what will it require, what will it take to sustain Ukraine over such a trajectory. That ought to be the question that Secretary Blinken begins to talk about with his counterparts.
And Mike McFaul, is there any chance that the other powers are going to agree to be guarantors of a ceasefire, which does imply some kind of peacekeeping force, some sort of coalition action, which means boots on the ground?
Well, possibly, that's right. But the way I understand the negotiations, including the ones that are not formal but informal proposals, President Zelensky's been very forward and innovative, and I would say creative in two major ways. One, he talks about neutrality for security guarantee of the UN Security Council and a few other members. Poland, Turkey, and Israel, I think, is still on the list. That is a very hard thing, as you were discussing. What does that mean in reality? How is that different than Budapest? But they are confident that they could get the Russians to agree to it because it would be a victory for Vladimir Putin to get neutrality. And then the second big bucket, of course, is where the borders of the state. Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials have hinted that they are prepared to agree to disagree about where the borders are and only unify through peaceful means. But unfortunately, we don't know what Putin thinks of that idea yet.